Alrighty, hello every folks, and good afternoon. So, basically, version 1.03 finally landed on the Switch here. Basically, was waiting a few days for this one to finally come to the version that I've got in order to kind of cover what changed in this patch, and basically, just like Gibbed has been well, telling us for a few days now, basically nothing has really changed in this patch. Not really a whole lot to report on. So for those that didn't know, there are a few bugs with the game at this point. It's a little bit odd that they're having a bit of a hard time addressing them so far, but hopefully this will be addressed, you know, sooner rather than later. A lot of them are minor things, like for example, Stinky Feet is something that did Shackle back in the PSP version. This still says Shackle instead of Stop, which is what it actually does now. You have things like, if we go over to the ninjas, all their debuffs say that they will cause a melee weapon of a single target to basically throw that debuff onto an opponent. This is incorrect. It will apply to any weapon that they're carrying. Same applies to the Dragoons and their Slayer skills, which once again mention that it is essentially it's specifically saying that it's a melee attack that will cause increased damage and go for 100% accuracy. Technically speaking, the increased damage part is more along the lines of they just ignore armor, but again, moot point for the time being. It's not just melee attacks is the thing. It will also, for example, work on a crossbow. Or, for example, in the case of the ninjas, you know, one of their best loadouts is essentially a short bow running in Venom. Like, short bow +1 or Damask bow +1 running in Venom is insanely good, but players kind of coming into it for the first time wouldn't really know to try that. Same thing with the Slayer skills on a Dragoon, pretty darn solid, but either way, they don't specifically say that it's something that you can do. Those points are minor, though, next to kind of the big one that a lot of folks have noticed, which is the fact that the AI does not, for whatever reason, seem to have the ability to understand debuffs. For those that haven't run into it yet, it basically looks a little bit like this. So, for example, one of the units that I like using right here is essentially just an all debuff caster unit. Now, I can take away all of their abilities to do literally anything else, so they don't have any ways to do damage here. We can go ahead and, I mean, hell, I could remove anything here and it really wouldn't make a difference. For whatever reason, they just don't understand how to use debuffs at the current time. Now, for a while, I thought that they still could do it every now and then. And upon going back and looking at it, most of them likely were coming from other sources because, you know, it's one of those cases where you don't really pick up on it. You're looking around, it's like, well, some units are poisoned, some units are stunned, whatever. And if they were coming from, say, dragons or ninjas or stuff, then whatever, that's there. But in the case of your wizards and other spellcasters and things like that, some of their best options are coming in the form of debuffs. Like, for example, concentration plus poison cloud is, technically speaking, the highest possible DPS in the game. They will refuse to use it outright. As you saw right there, they have the MP to use it, they have the range to use it. They have literally no other potential options to act on, even if we, say, turn on Conserve RT, and they will instead opt to attack with a stick. Now, this is a little bit odd for a number of reasons. If we then were to, say, go back, and then we'll, let's say, go for something like this, interrupt them real quick, and put them on a different AI pattern, we can show that basically it doesn't matter the AI pattern, they will still do this. I have tried this on all AI versions. So here's the thing. I can kind of somewhat explain what probably happened here, but realistically we don't know for sure. Because basically, and as you saw right there, they just decided to charge up their MP despite the fact that they had more than enough MP to cast everything that they can possibly do. So what I believe happened here is they probably had a similar situation to what happened on the PSP version. Namely, when it comes to these AI patterns and things, it's a little bit odd to get them to do what you want. As I understand, the exact values for a lot of these things weren't exactly known. So, for example, when the One Vision mod was coming in, they were going and they were adjusting a lot of these debuffs to have additional effects on them to kind of trick the AI into kind of prioritizing them a bit higher. In this particular case, it almost seems like they wanted to avoid that and just turned off the ability to use them. This is what they did with certain items and things like that in the PSP version. where there were just certain things that would not want to function properly, so they seemingly turned them off for that reason. But either way, currently AI spellcasters don't seem to have the ability to throw out debuffs. Technically, in most situations, for when it comes to a lot of the newer players, I doubt many of them will even notice. But it is weird considering enemy spellcasters do come with them equipped, so they're clearly intended to be able to use them, but they will not use them. So hopefully this will end up getting fixed. Part of it might potentially be seen as kind of an overcorrection for what happened with the original Japanese PSP release. For those that didn't know, that version, they got a little carried away with the amount of buffs. I mean, you literally would have cases where you'd be sitting there for like 10-20 minutes while they went and just applied Healcraft to their entire army of berserkers. And it's like, why exactly are you using all these buffs that give you no benefit? But any darn ways. So as far as all that goes, I believe they probably had an issue where they the AI was probably doing what it did in the PSP version, namely understanding how much damage they're potentially going to do with poison. That's why they ended up spamming stun and poison quite a bit in that one. That it seemingly they seemed to act in a way like they already knew the amount that they were going to land. Because basically when they're attacking, instead of a damage number, it's something along the lines of they're basically running their mind against the other character's mind to determine the duration of a debuff. So in the case of poison, theoretically it would be something like before in the earlier version, they'd be like, oh, I'm gonna be doing poison, so let's say, I can go do a meteor strike and that's gonna do like 40 damage. Or I might potentially roll this poison, and it might roll, for a really high amount of RT, and let's say it'll last for like 5 turns. That's going to be more damage than the Meteor Strike. So in this case, I believe what probably ended up happening is that no matter what, the poison in this case, and theoretically many other buffs as well, would always have the higher DPS no matter what, so probably they would just end up going and spouting it endlessly. My guess, based on kind of what we've seen so far, is that they probably had a bit of an issue getting it to behave properly, and that we'll probably get some kind of patch for this at some point. But obviously, I don't know for sure. I have no inside information on this kind of thing, but it's just a weird little quirk of caster AI for the moment. Because, yeah, for those that don't know, in terms of the numbers that it can do, even high-tier summons and things like that are throwing out, 1,500 per attack. That is to say, in multiple chunks, but they're still throwing it out 1,500 or so. But what happens in the case of poison? Well, you've got several, high-level monsters or whatever else with 5,000 health on there, and they're bleeding away about 10% of their health every time it ticks. They're doing that 3 times per round. Suddenly they're looking at that and let's see, I can roughly throw out 1,500 per each one of these monster units. They're attacked in a 5-tile cluster here. This is looking pretty fantastic. So they're like, oh, I can do what is somewhere in the ballpark of 7,500, 8,000, whatever damage with a single debuff. So my guess is it's something along those lines, but either way, we don't know for sure. I doubt we'll get a direct answer, obviously just due to the obvious kinds of translation type of things. But either way, hopefully it'll get patched at some point. Thankfully, we haven't seen any real, major bugs. Up to this point, it seems like stability was their main concern. There were a few occasional, crashes and things that you'd see on the game, but it seems like they've mostly ironed that out. I know ever since it updated, I mean, granted, it's only updated, within the last day. But I haven't seen it having any sorts of crash issues. I will say, by the way, if anyone could point out, because I'm just curious about this, when it came to crashes for Reborn, anyone that I saw that had an OLED or a version 2 Switch seemed to have no issues whatsoever. I've got an original model Switch, and many others seem to have originals as well. Those did seem to have it, but hardware-wise, there shouldn't be too much of a change there, so I wonder why. Because I know it's not just this game, it's many other games that I've had that happen with too. Generally, XCOM 2 is seen as being pretty darn solid, but, it ends up crashing. I've had Sonic crash on me before. I've had pretty much everything crash on me before on this Switch. So I'm curious if it's just an older model thing, or if it's a newer model thing. Because again, many reviews out there for games that say they're perfectly solid, including I have seen only a couple comments mentioning that they also ran into crashes with this game. And for me, it was only in situations where I was going and repeatedly saving on multiple save files to see... I just like to keep specific save files all over the place. So, you know, I've already maxed out the save file count for this game over a month ago, so got a lot of them going on. I don't know if that's related. Either way, hopefully this last issue sorted it out, and I'm hoping whenever 1.04 lands, it'll hopefully solve the AI thing. It's just kind of weird, but either way. Just to kind of show this here, like, they do all have the ability to petrify and whatever else. We'll pretty much always see them going for things like Ice Over instead. But you're still going to get debuffs coming in regularly from a lot of these other ones, like skills seem to work perfectly fine and all that. Still a little bit odd that the player's also allowed to use Condemn in the case of Necromancers. So, I mean, I don't know if that potentially means that maybe they were planning on a multiplayer thing down the road. Who knows? Last bit of news, by the way, if you didn't see the interview, I'll try to link it in the description here, but if you didn't see the interview, they mentioned that if Reborn does well, which it has, surprisingly, Reborn's been, like, it's been selling pretty darn well. It's been repeatedly showing up on pretty decent sales charts there. I say pretty decent because, okay, it's obviously not going to be, you know, touching, you know, friggin' Pokemon or whatever, but surprisingly, it's actually done a lot better than many kind of newer AAA releases, so that's unexpected. Any darn ways. So yeah, it's been doing pretty solidly. Reviews have been great. I mean, this game's absolutely wonderful, so they did mention that if it does well and it's well received by fans and all that kind of thing, then they're planning on maybe revisiting the rest of the series too. So who knows? We might be getting that Knight of Lodis or Ogre Battle remake after all. Either way, all things in time. We don't want to get too excited yet, but you know, good times, good times. Anyway, so I'll leave it there. A bit of an exciting note there, and man, oh man. I'm just still so happy with this thing. Like, literally, when the only complaint is, man, I wish the AI was more ruthless, like, when it comes to war crimes, that's a good sign. That's just a real solid sign. Which, by the way, if you're curious, I have gone and tested every debuff on this list. It's something specifically about debuffs. That's the main reason I'm saying I'm pretty sure it's a priorities thing. Like, if you give them any damaging move or anything with a number to it whatsoever, they will do it. So I'm, like, absolutely positive it's just some kind of number somewhere that got missed. Again, nobody really knows what these numbers were. Even when One Vision was being made, as far as I'm aware, nobody found, like, actual numerical priorities for debuffs or whatever else. It was just sort of felt out. So, who knows? We'll figure that out when it comes. All right, y'all have a good one. Take care.